Moscow.
A colossal city with over 13 million inhabitants, bathed in light even at night, boasting one of the world's largest metro systems. Once a capital where you could get lost in the crowd, where life danced even in the alleys. Young people played guitar on Arbat Street, clinking vodka glasses in cafes. The popular Russian drink Stolichnaya cost 600 rubles. A loaf of bread cost 30. A liter of milk cost 70 rubles. Street vendors, theater queues, concert posters. Young people skateboarding in Gorky Park, and civil servants rushing to catch the subway in the evening shared the same rhythm. Security was not a concern, but part of everyday life. People walked home late at night, finding the capital full of life. That life is gone now. Now sirens have replaced people's laughter. Airports have turned into battlefields. The panic rising in the shadow of the Kremlin is now everyday life itself. Because this war is no longer just in Donetsk. Ukraine has brought the heat of the conflict to the heart of Moscow. From Belgorod to Kursk, mornings in the neighborhoods surrounding the capital now begin with the sound of sirens. The Russian people, who once watched news of the war across the border on television, now watch their own cities being bombed on the same screens. Flights at Domodedovo and Vnukovo airports have been suspended repeatedly due to drone attacks. Metro signals are cut off, neighborhoods are blacked out, GPS systems go haywire. The number of drones shot down in Moscow skies during the summer exceeded 100. People who once enjoyed ice cream on Tverskaya Boulevard on summer evenings now fear approaching windows at night. Generators are being discussed in homes, and children are trying to get used to sudden power outages. This means that a war is striking not a distant country, but the very heart of the home. The harshest face of this rupture was seen in mid-March. On the night of March 11th, 2025, streetlights flickered, air defense systems lit up the night sky, and emergency alerts echoed through the city. That night went down in Russian history as the longest air raid siren in the capital. The attack came not from one direction, but from all sides. Layered defense systems had to engage multiple targets simultaneously. This was more than a military blow. For civilians, it was the moment when the familiar flow of life was disrupted. But this was only the beginning. By May, that disruption had turned into a crack. On May 6, 2025, airports around Moscow were targeted again. Both runways and approach and departure corridors were under threat. Takeoffs were halted, landings were delayed, hundreds of flights were disrupted, thousands of passengers were glued to terminal screens. Civil aviation authorities used the phrase, "waiting for airspace security," for the first time. This phrase had become a protocol that even ordinary passengers had memorized. On May 25th, a similar scenario unfolded again. Once more, planes were unable to take off from Moscow airports. Some planes were even placed in a holding pattern in the air. That is, they were kept waiting for hours, circling before landing. These events were no longer coincidental. They were a pattern. In June, new attacks were added to this pattern. During the week of June 8th, flights were suspended once again due to waves of drones around Moscow and St. Petersburg. This development affected not only air traffic, but also everyday technological life. Navigation apps crashed, drivers got lost on the roads, and location services on cell phones malfunctioned. These disruptions were not just a few seconds long. Sometimes they lasted for hours and affected large areas. The impact of electronic warfare turned into a layer of pressure that the public could not see but could feel. On June 25th, Russian air defense announced it had shot down 114 UAVs. This was not just a numerical record. What was really noteworthy was the official emphasis on the phrase, simultaneous multi-zone attacks. Attacks were no longer coming from a specific front, but from all sides. Each attack scenario became a new stress test. By July, the picture had darkened further. On July 4th, a transformer station near Sergeyev Posad in the Moscow Oblast was hit. Energy infrastructure was now being targeted directly. This meant that emergency plans had to be taken off the shelf for every business and institution around the capital. The next day, July 5th, 4 more UAVs were shot down around Moscow. The attacks had become sequential. These pressures, coming 2 days in a row, created lasting anxiety in the minds of both operators and civilians. Even though the power outages were short-lived, the question, when will it happen again, had become the silent guest of every evening. On July 18th, the situation worsened. Flights were suspended at Domodedovo and Vnukovo airports due to drone attacks. This was a serious logistical crisis in the middle of the high season. Shortly thereafter, on July 20th, it was announced that 142 drones had been launched across Russia, and 117 of them had been shot down. 27 unmanned aerial vehicles were destroyed in the air in the Moscow region. This meant open warfare in the skies above the capital. Airlines began preparing backup airports and alternative slots for each flight. The end of August was a turning point for Moscow. On August 26th, simultaneous shutdowns occurred at 3 major airports around the capital. Flights were cancelled, panicked warnings were sent to passengers, and pilots were diverted from their routes. On the same day, raids coincided with fires and explosions in western regions. This was indicative of a multi-pronged attack strategy that spread not only to the capital, but across the country. Air defense resources around Moscow now had to be divided to other fronts. The capital was no longer fully protected. The night of September 1st became the latest link in this chain. According to official statements, 160 UAVs reached Russian territory in a single night, followed by another 152 UAVs in the days that followed. These enormous numbers were not just technical figures, but represented the erosion of the sense of security in a country's capital. The sky darkened, sirens blared, flights were cancelled, and the people waited in despair. 54% of Russians say the war has negatively affected their daily lives, either directly or indirectly. This percentage clearly reveals not only individual complaints, but also the social and economic tension created by the war on the home front. This shift shows that the victory-oriented nationalism atmosphere at the beginning of the war has given way to silent discontent. The legitimacy of the war in society is now being questioned. Support is gradually declining. For broad segments of the population, the war is no longer an abstract defense of the homeland. It means longer working hours, lower purchasing power, and less hope. According to research, 40% of the population reports working more than they did a few years ago. However, this increased workload is not reflected in their quality of life. People are working more, but they do not feel they are getting a better life in return. Only a small 6% say their workload has decreased, which shows that the vast majority of society is working at an increasing pace and wearing themselves out. The economic effects of the war are particularly visible in large cities. Rising living costs, salaries eroded by inflation, and soaring food prices are increasing the pressure on the working classes. In some sectors where layoffs are increasing, it is reported that more responsibilities are being placed on the remaining employees. This brings not only economic, but also psychological fatigue. This feeling of more effort, same or even lower standard of living, which is becoming widespread among the lower and middle classes, contradicts the Kremlin's official war rhetoric. Despite the propaganda presenting the war as a symbol of victory, unity, and strength, for a large segment of the population, this process means exhaustion and dissatisfaction. Of course, Ukraine's successive attacks play a major role in all these developments, and it seems that this window of opportunity for attacks is widening with each passing day. This is because Ukraine is not only maintaining its striking capabilities, but also constantly improving them. One of the striking developments this week was the first field use of Ukrainian-made Flamingo FP5 cruise missiles. Developed by Firepoint, this system is notable as a family of land-launched, domestically produced cruise missiles. The announced range is 3,000 kilometers. This means that not only Crimea and Donbass, but also bases in Volgograd, Kazan, and even the eastern Urals are theoretically within the range of this weapon. This missile, which is said to have a warhead capacity of over 1 ton, is designed to target much deeper objectives than the classic HIMARS or Storm Shadow systems currently in use. Although open-source information indicates that it is still in limited production, the emphasis on mass production capacity and operational precision is noteworthy. The fact that the first attack targeted a Russian airbase in Crimea shows that this missile represents not just a symbolic, but a strategic threshold. Another critical development is the US approval of the sale of 3,350 ERAMs to Ukraine. ERAMs are munitions launched from fighter jets, with a range of hundreds of miles and carrying extremely precise guidance systems. Their most notable feature is that they are designed specifically to strike hard targets. With the integration of this munition into the front lines, Ukraine will now have the potential to conduct night raids not only on the front lines, but also on Russia's rear logistics chain, radar systems, airstrips, and munitions depots. Although ERAMs do not directly target Moscow, They change the rhythm of the map in operational terms. In other words, they force the enemy to constantly rewrite its strategic plans. Another noteworthy system that has come to the fore recently is the new generation of long-range UAVs called Palyonitsia. Unlike classic drones, this system has an autonomous architecture that operates on missile logic. Qualities such as low radar signature, AI-assisted guidance, and route learning during flight make this platform both difficult to detect and resistant to electronic jamming. The system's most important advantage is its ability to target multiple targets simultaneously, thanks to swarm coordination. Its ability to track routes and update targets, especially in electronic warfare environments, seriously challenges conventional defense systems. This represents a new phase that is both numerically and technically exhausting for Russian defense layers. When these 3 points are considered together, the picture emerging for the Kremlin is clear in one word: geography is shrinking. The Moscow area, which remained calm at the beginning of the war by saying, "The front is far from us," now routinely experiences high-risk scenarios, such as flight bans, airport shutdowns, radar conflicts, and emergency power backups. So where is the air defense system that should protect Moscow? Actually, it is there, but it is no longer sufficient. The layered air defense systems deployed in the Moscow region, such as the S-400, Pantsir S-1, and Tor M2, theoretically provide an impressive shield. It is even reported that more advanced systems, such as the S-500, have been deployed in limited numbers. However, Ukraine's methods of attack go far beyond classic threat definitions. Unmanned aerial vehicles, cruise missiles, electronic jamming, and simultaneous attacks from multiple directions are wearing down the Russian defense network. Moreover, these attacks are not limited to the air. Infrastructure such as radar systems, command centers, and transformer stations are also being targeted. This creates serious blind spots in the defense layers around Moscow. For example, the destruction of 2 separate S-400 radar systems in Crimea during attacks organized by Ukrainian intelligence on June 26th demonstrated how such technical interventions affect Moscow's defense balance. The sustainability of air defense systems is also being questioned. In particular, bottlenecks in the supply of short-range missiles used in the Pantsir and Tor systems are increasingly limiting the Kremlin's military resources. If the current trend continues, Russia could experience deep fractures in its internal balance in the coming period. In centers such as Moscow and St. Petersburg, homes are no longer being sold, hotels are not filling up, and investors are turning their attention elsewhere. Land under the threat of war does not promise an attractive future for anyone. The airspace can be closed at any moment. A drone alert stops not only flights, but also the flow of life. Railway delays and explosions in energy transmission lines disrupt production chains. When production slows down, prices on supermarket shelves rise. When this chain breaks, it's not just goods that run out, but people's patience too. Insurance companies are now cautious about operations around Moscow. Premiums are rising. Getting a product to the shelves is now more expensive, more risky, more fragile. But the economy isn't just about numbers. The real loss is the feeling of safety on the streets. In Russia's big cities, the question, "Will it fall on our neighborhood tonight?" has become the inner voice of the people. Parks are empty. Concerts are cancelled. Theaters are closing their curtains. Schools are closed for a few days at a time due to alarms. Cultural life has surrendered to a suspended uncertainty. Society is retreating into parody, introspection, and silence in the face of the collapse of the illusion of security. As anger mixed with humor spills over onto social media, rumors spreading on Telegram channels are swallowing up the truths of state media. Everyone is now looking for the truth elsewhere. The biggest migration is an invisible brain drain. Young, educated, and mobile Russians no longer see a future in this country. IT specialists, engineers, academics. While the doors are still open, suitcases are being packed. Staying is no longer a matter of courage but of helplessness, and those left behind are waiting. Waiting for a new attack, a new announcement, a new blackout. Consumption is declining. No one wants to buy a car or move house because there is no guarantee of the future. Everyone is cautious about time, fearful of their wallet. At the political level, the Kremlin's voice is no longer as strong as it used to be. What was Putin's biggest promise to his people for years? Security. Now that promise has been shattered. Radicals are filling this void. Nationalists who believe the war is not being waged harshly enough are raising their voices around figures like Gherkin. These circles, even more aggressive than the Kremlin, are slowly winning over public opinion. The cracks within the state, while not yet causing a major upheaval, clearly show the tension behind the wall. Information control is no longer sustainable. Images of soldiers at the front, leaked orders, reports of sabotage. There is a growing gap between what the state says and what the people see. This gap breeds not loyalty, but silence. And silence is the most dangerous silence for any authoritarian regime. In the military sphere, the crisis is now being experienced not only at the front, but also behind the front lines. Attacks on facilities such as Alabuga, Tambov, and Tula were blows to the heart of the production line. The lack of ammunition leaves factory workers as helpless as soldiers at the front. Mobilization capacity is running out. Prisoners were taken. Ethnic minority regions were pressured. Volunteers were persuaded, but now there are no more people to send to the front. The command structure is becoming increasingly reluctant. The targeted generals are afraid to make decisions. Orders are delayed. The logistics chain is faltering. And all this military structure is facing swarms of AI-controlled UAVs, radar-resistant platforms, and high-precision munitions guided by Western sensors. Russia still has a navy equipped with torpedoes and analog radars from the 90s. This is not just a technological gap. It is a generational gap. The outcome is clear. A revolution, a sudden collapse, or an uprising may not seem likely today. But this order is crumbling from within, day by day. The Kremlin can still instill fear, yes, but fear alone cannot sustain a state. A system that once kept all its gears turning now struggles to stay afloat in silence. The streets are silent. The crowds are silent. The televisions are silent. And this war is no longer just about territory. It is also being fought for the concept of security in the minds of a people. But unfortunately, Moscow no longer represents that security. Thank you for watching.